Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
Hello.
How are you all doing tonight?
Okay.
Good. Tired.
There's a lot of things covered in this paper.
Thank you for putting these notes together. Yeah, they look really good, and I think that this is basically all of the. I don't feel like anything's missing.
There's a lot more to put there. But
Well, I apologize for not contributing to the notion. My excuse is that I had to log in, and it was making me do a two-factor authentication, and my phone was in the other room, and so that was the obstacle, which is not a good excuse. But it wasn't.
No. It's entirely legitimate because I think it's the same thing where I think I'm still going to use Notion to basically do admin stuff and
and
keep track
link
of
things together. It's nice for that.
but like mostly tagging and organizing, and maybe even trying to get here's the talk for anybody who needs it. But like I'm okay with I'm not going to throw it away, but like for live stuff, and also for like meetings, like I would like this more for meetings just because I would like to get the new people come in and know they can write something or even like ask a question or have a little more interactive, because I think the Notion has become like it's just this thing that has a bunch of scrap notes on it that is locked away, and I really want to not do that. Not because I don't want to take notes, but more like I think there's just a better way to do it, and I'll probably like periodically just say, hey, here's this document, especially for something like this. Like not everything's going to be biology of cognition, but there's so much stuff here, and it's even in its datedness, it ties to a lot of things. So I feel like, okay, for this, I might as well just throw this here. But yeah, hey, this out of the way. I'll get this set up. But yeah, I mean, we can have a normal like meeting start up of like welcoming or things to go on. Also, Bradley, I don't know if you want to go into much now, but I'll show this what you put together, which is really great for the Royal Society paper.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
But yeah, any welcome. How's everyone doing? Any specific updates? Since we haven't met every single day, in a row for like 5 days again. So there might actually be news to say. So we left off on this paper like just past nerve cells and starting to get into this whole like function, I think, and architecture space. I forget exactly where we left off, but somewhere before representation.
I don't think we started function. I don't think we got all the way through architecture.
Okay, we'll pick up somewhere over here. Yeah, my general update is it's sort of my first normal week since I got just destroyed for like a work-related trip I was on, and that, oh man, that was such a. So I'm really trying to focus on like making myself able to do the work I want to do again, because I was kind of getting a rhythm that just walloped. But I feel a little bit. I'm fighting the good fight on that front. I don't have any cool things to show for it, but like there's some work in, I guess, sort of the Joe Pro, or like what we call like the Manifesto Project, or around person studies, all of those things. There's a lot of work happening in that space for me internally, because it's a lot of like organizing things, and I'm making myself go to the bookstore and see how people are writing, even in the most popular sense. I mean, I'll find some really old books, you'll find the old things, and really trying to figure out like what it is that I'm trying to do in those spaces, in a positive way, as a slight a small little thing about someone in the Joe Pro, like, I guess, community, who I had a like a mentee, I guess, is sort of like has been inspired to sort of pay it forward and do a mentoring session with someone else who's in a specific like community that they're related to. So it's really cool to see that. And I know I mentioned that because it's a nice thing, but also like I know we're kind of getting in the wave of maybe people are stopping by looking at this from like Google Summer Coast stuff and checking out the lab for all these other things. But I haven't been sounding the horn as much about like, oh, mentoring and development and let's have a class of interns. I don't think anything's happening with our the Albany interns much this year. But that's that's partly because I haven't done some things for that. But like those are still a major part of what we're doing. So I feel like we have a bunch of people coming to the lab and we're happy to have that, and we want to build, and I'm looking forward to that as the summer goes on too. So more to come in that way. That's basically my update. And also like I'm excited about the AGRT stuff that Bradly's put together and that whole event. And the other thing I really wanted to mention is the AI calls for abstract. I think they finally put a deadline on it. It's a much simpler thing than a paper or anything like that. But it's just that I think this also due March 1st. So just to mention that. Yeah. Anyone else want to say anything before we look at
Or are you planning to submit something for embodied cognition workshop or embodiment workshop or whatever it is?
I'm definitely going to do one thing. I forget if we have the
You're talking about embodied intelligence?
Yeah, embodied intelligence, that's it.
Yeah. Can't really find the one I want for it. I am. I'm at least gonna do one thing, and I know last time we talked about like Amanda mentioned she's not gonna want to push anything for the other one. Where did it go here? Here we go. Yeah, here we go. I may try to do something with the embodied neurophenomenology stuff. I definitely want to do something for all of my taxonomy, nosology, language stuff. Even if it's basically a really, really, really simple version of what I might submit is something on Levin and Bongard's paper, and maybe some things from the Bassett paper, and some other stuff I've been looking at in terms of how to push some language forward in the space. Maybe even borrow, maybe a reference from things from Biology of Cognition. There's so much historical language content here, and it's been kind of a fun tour of like this exposure to this sort of really classical or at least classical-ish to me, or older school maybe is more even a better term, way of talking about it, and then all this other stuff, like all the things that weren't there yet when he was writing here, and that's maybe a fun reference point. But I'm definitely going to submit something along the lines of language and that specifically. I don't know if anyone else wants to do anything there. I think honestly, Hussein, I might nudge Hussein to do something on like VR because there's a lot there, and it'd be pretty easy for him to do, and I know he's looking for stuff to do there.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Even just like kind of a take on. I know he's doing some things in like a game development space, and I'm sure there could be some. There's already been conversations about such topics, so he could easily present on it. So I might.
He's also interested in philosophy as well. Like
yeah, exactly. Very much so. So that's there, but I don't know. You could probably submit a version of this to that conference too. Really, but I don't know what you want to submit. Did you submit something already, Bradly? I forget.
Yeah, I did submit an abstract. Yeah. No, it's something else, but I don't have it open now. But it's yeah. I'll put it in one of the channels. So,
okay.
Yeah. Maybe I'll do. No, I did talk about it last week at Saturday's meeting, but
I forgot the topic specifically.
Yeah, but it's kind of a mix of all the stuff that's been done on development of neural simulations.
Yeah, okay. That's
Yeah.
that's you. Right, your name in caps because you deserve it. All right. Great. So we have some things cooking for that. It's already, whoops, the 21st. And it's a short month too. I think it's the 29th, right? Because there's actually
the longest February.
Yes.
Leap year.
Yes. I know someone whose birthday was on leap year day, so they actually get to be another year. All right. So yeah, anything else before we jump into the AGRT world models paper? Good. I assume you're okay with me showing it here, Bradly.
Oh yeah, definitely. I want everyone's feedback on it because it's due on the 1st. So, and when we
I just tried to share it, or I can reshare it with people too. But yeah, all right, cool. If you want to walk through it or talk about it.
Well, I mean, it's just kind of a combination of the stuff that we've been talking about in the group, and then Morgan and Jesse and I had another meeting about the AI part. So basically, the idea is it's divided into 3 parts. So the first part is a revisitation of the cybernetics of like the 50s or from the 40s to the 70s. Specifically, the Evergood regulator theorem. So that's, of course, the paper by Condon and Ashby. But it really kind of, fits into a lot of the things we've been talking about with respect to cybernetic regulation and things like that. So the concept of a good regulator, there's a lot of language from that mid-century perspective that may be useful for other things, but people kind of forgotten about it. So this part of the paper is maybe somewhat historical, and has like some insights perhaps into things going on today. And then the second part of the paper is kind of run through a couple of examples. So I'm thinking a couple of computational models, just kind of working them out rather quickly and saying, these are things that kind of revisit this notion of a good regulator. So, there are a lot of far from equilibrium, out of distribution, and configurational systems that we can point to say this is how the good regulator interfaces with actual data from the world. And then, different types of systems. And it's not, the typical system, the way that they presented it in the paper was really kind of, it was, they'd have like a drawing of a domain, and like the good regulator had to be within that domain, but it was all very like sort of almost qualitative or metaphorical. I mean, they gave some like mathematical terms. Well, they were just parameters that didn't have any rooting in anything. So this part will be kind of like pulling it into the world of what happens in the real world, or at least real world based models. So that's, and then the third part is about like machine learning and AI. And we talked about world models in terms of the Schmidthuber paper, and so that's a key paper because they kind of get at world models very directly to give an example of what they mean. And there's not a lot of, as far as I know, and we talked about this, there isn't a lot on world models that we could draw. Like you can't write a huge review like you can do of even of like anything in mid-century cybernetics. So I mean, this part would be just kind of like going through the literature. We talked about a number of topics that could be candidates for this. But just to like say what a world model is, how it connects to the good regulator, some of the things people are doing in machine learning, some of the topics that may be relevant to, and then that's it. So that's the paper.
Sorry, I'm driving, so my comments will be I'm parked right now though, but
Okay.
I would want to say more about the world models because I mean I do like the follow up I've done so far suggests that getting into the the dreamer models, like there are more models that kind of fall under the world model category.
Yeah.
But that aren't necessarily called world model, you know. That it might be large enough that you could do a bit of a review. And at least I am seeing. I still haven't had time to look at the Bengio paper in depth, but I mean, actually, the two Bengio papers, like the consciousness prior, and then the G flows, to see what their connection is. I mean, I just wonder if they are connected, because again, like, this is a very curated set of references that Safron gave us. You know, anyway, just that would be my one quick comment before my daughter gets in the car.
Oh yeah. Well, no, I think that's good, and I don't know. Probably put that in there just to make sure that it's clear, because
Sure.
that's kind of what they're looking for. I mean, we don't want to say that we're going to punt on the aspect of modern machine learning and just make this about.
Yeah. I'm really curious. Like I want to get to the point where, because I think this is like this background, I think these are background papers for actually kind of grokking Safron's contribution to this.
Yeah.
In terms of what he's calling, like FEP-AI or yeah.
Oh yeah, the free energy principle AI.
Yeah, but it's like but again, it's like he wants to connect it. Again, like I'm not really sure how much he gets into implementations and I'm like I hope there's time. I mean, there's definitely time. There's definitely time to get in touch with people at Active Inference Institute and find out about like implementations of, say, some of the, like active inference implementations of reinforcement learning. And hopefully specifically ones in which are trying to address some of the similar world model issues.
Yeah.
Like it being about efficiency, it being about being able to train in imagination, or to train in this reduced environment, and trying to think of some features of that. Anyway, sorry,
Yeah, I know.
I'm literally on my phone.
No, you saw a lot of the links that you shared about this, and I haven't gotten
I
it.
did. I mean, I certainly. I mean, that was more just like, I followed that guy for a while, and like it was the first time where I thought I found his videos to be very helpful in kind of like putting these papers into a bigger context. Somebody who's knowledgeable, putting it into a bigger context and kind of giving you the connections between, like canonical papers, anyway, yeah. Like happy to follow up on this.
Oh, that's the video of Hough Schmidthuber's world models, but that's Yannick Kilcher.
Yeah.
I think he goes through that paper in that video.
Yeah, so he goes through that paper and the Dreamer paper. Forgive me I forget the first and last author on some of the other papers, but Peter Abil is one of the middle authors on the Dreamer papers.
Yeah.
I think he's got some of those references. And somebody, and then did you see the link? Or I think because when OpenAI's Sora came out, Jan LeCun had I thought an interesting post. So one, Francois Chalet was just like, hey, so does Sora have a physics or model? So this is the video generation tool, right?
Right.
And so he had some interesting comments on that. And Jan LeCun's comments on it were like, I think it would be good for everybody if I just review what my definition of a world model is.
Right.
but it was specifically about the Sora, implementation.
He didn't do this. Like, I think he did this on social media. He didn't do it on in a preprint.
He did.
Okay, yeah.
He did. Yeah, sorry. These were both, like, one was Twitter and the other was, like, Facebook.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean...
LinkedIn, yeah.
I saw it. Yeah, I saw it in part, and I was trying to, like, figure out if he had, like, a better reference, but, yeah, he had some really interesting things to say there, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they were good. And potentially helpful in this putting together it was nice to see, like, LeCun's in particular, just because, like, it was like, oh, even for big people in the fields, this is still kind of an open definition,
Yeah. There was a paper in the list here, Jesse. I don't know if it's like AIXI, might be up a little ways. Oh, there it is, number 12. Yeah.
Is that the Safron one?
Yeah, that is the Safron one.
Yeah, that sounds like his acronym.
Yeah.
Like I haven't got into that yet.
That is about, like, the FEP-AI. So that's actually free energy principle active inference, not artificial intelligence, I think.
It is, but I want to say he's linking it as a. I mean, I could be wrong, but to me, active inference or free energy principle stuff is just another way of talking about variational Bayes.
Right.
like and as such, there's kind of a connection to these dreamer models and other kind of latent spaced representations of pixel space as being the world model, or the model in which you're doing things, which it's not the real world,
right?
Which is pixel world, but anyway, so I could be wrong, but I think it would be really good to get into those papers and see how he's defining those.
Yeah.
Because I mean, partly I say that just because I think it's a lot, I think it actually makes it easier to understand if you can connect it to these other, previous models.
Yeah, no, I agree about going over the world models, like, finding all the sort of ways in which people are talking about this. And, they might call it a world model, they might not, but just to have it as, like, and I mean, once we go through it, I think we can figure out how to, like, explain it in a way that fits, kind of is consistent with the good regulator. So, there might be some themes running through these papers where, they kind of get at different things that are going on that you need to have a world model, whatever that is, and that would be useful. Yeah.
Well, that's why the Chalet comments I thought were good too, in the sense that, like, when you see the video generation done by with that OpenAI Sora model, does it, what kind of quote understanding does it need to have to be able to do that kind of generation? And I mean, I could be wrong about this, but I'm thinking of that as the same kind of like, you need to have a model of the thing you're trying to control.
All right, Amanda, do you have anything to?
Yeah, well, because I missed the meeting where you really got into this stuff. I'm glad to hear your thoughts and to see the paper. I will take a closer look and leave some comments.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna. This is just the abstract. So
it's the abstract that's due March 1st.
Yeah, just the abstract, and then the paper will be, June 1st or something, like maybe July 1st. I'm not really sure what that date is, but that'll be this summer. So we'll have a lot of time to work on the paper and get it in shape.
Anyway, no, that's cool, and I appreciate more discussion. And yeah, there'll be plenty of time for this one. I know the EI conference. I just mentioned that's Hussein again. That's more like a presentation, so there's not really a paper there per se, but we can make artifacts around that as it comes up. Okay, yeah, this is cool. There'll be more ahead later, and I'm really curious. I'm curious. I know kind of what we'll put for some of these things, but like as we go here and incorporate the things that Morgan was talking about here, will be exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. So let's see. We've gone over that. We've done that. We mentioned that too. I think we're ready to move on to the main event. Anything else before we start on biology of cognition? Okay. So yeah, I mean, just to show the notes document, it's not anything fancy. I was just breaking down into some of our resources, and then I'm trying to get a more of an actual notes thing that's a little more processed, as opposed to just our stream of conscious notes that I take sometimes of varying degrees of quality and reference. You can still do that. Like, please go down here and put notes if you want to do it. Not mandatory. And then I'll try to, like, on this, using this stuff, this is sort of an experiment, and I like it, but also like it's kind of hard. I can't quote directly from these things because they're image filed basically, so I can't pull text. I have the text here if we need it to pull from it, but playing with this, but even just like taking pictures of this stuff is kind of something, I guess. But yeah, let's oops, I just lost everybody. Okay. We're somewhere around here, somewhere in this, continue our journey in the land of architecture and function. Yeah, that's about where we were last time. So that's where we can start, but also I know Amanda's writing some stuff here, and I don't know if we want to maybe talk about this first or if we want to talk about this later. I guess I'll go through it really briefly. So I started with language. I mean, it's sort of my, not really intentionally, but I just repeat the phrase so much I just went to like language models and artifacts. But so he's talking about classical stuff, but then also just the differences between now and then.
Yeah, so I agree that it's interesting that so this paper is lacking in a sense because it doesn't have insights from certain disciplines that are more developed now. But I also think that's like kind of, it's maybe a good thing because it that's like almost not, it almost doesn't matter because the level of conversation in the paper is like abstract enough that maybe it would even be a hindrance. Like it's almost like hard to imagine this kind of paper being published today. Although I think it's like the kind of discussion that's needed if the task is to like unify the cognitive sciences. And so in that way, it's like ahead of its time because it existed before these
Yeah.
schisms. And before science became like just so specialized.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's actually this is essentially a point I actually might want to make in what I do for the embodied intelligence stuff. Is about that. Is about the and I also harken back to I'll show my background for a second. This whole conference and whatnot, which was the CVMM talk, where there was kind of this call, like another way to interpret the call from the people at like DeepMind and the titans of AI, big tech AI research, was we need things that kind of help us function at maybe a different level, or a more synthetic or more integrative level, that to help determine, to do some work there. We're looking for in academia or smaller groups to do some of that. I don't really want to call it theory work, but kind of things at a different scope, which is a tangent, but I think it harkens to, or maybe more of a point. More importantly than that, I would say yes to what Amanda just said, and I think that's a dilemma, and also are there ways to return to that are useful, or has it gotten too granular? And I think that similar principle applies to like CogSci broadly, applies to a lot of things in sort of the what I've called inarticulately person study spaces. So yeah, that's a really great point. And please, I think I'm interrupting you, whatever you're saying here, so please finish that. We can go back to that. I don't mean to like.
Oh no, just that this paper is a good example of that. Like,
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then this section for theory of models is like the big premise. What he's saying, biology is inherent. Cognition is this, and it is that, and kind of making these claims about other things you can take away from it. Living system is predictive and circulatory. We kind of get to that next. I really would like to almost, like, I want to write a blog post about what I think Bradly was getting at here, but I don't know how to say it or write it. And I know I've kind of mentioned a few times, I can just go back to the video and do it. Because I think it ties into what Amanda said, in that it maybe isn't a path that we didn't go down exactly, but there's something there that I think could be articulated nicely, even if it's more of like a landmark than a stepping stone, I guess.
Right. Yeah, it'd be interesting. Another person who kind of falls in this category is Stephen Wolfram, and he does a lot of stuff on like a different kind of science, and it's just kind of like his conception of the way we should do science is different than like what other people are doing. So it leads him. It's not just the language; it's different. It leads you down different avenues, but you have to, have to know that. You have to know sort of that's your starting point, and which I don't know if that's good or bad. It could be like misleading, or it could be like wrong, but it could also be just another set of insights that have people just overlooked because they weren't using the right kind of approaches or language or whatever.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's another fun thing I would like to like look at a macro level, but that's outside of the scope of things right now. Obviously, all sorts of classical cybernetic stuff has come up. I took this block quote from EGRT, which is sort of in the, I think the representation section or something like that. There's a whole part of the natural language. There's a lot more too, and just things that it'd be nice to kind of review this later. I'm putting this section here to think of like things that we've already talking about, things that either he's mentioned in the paper or that we've talked about later on. Yeah, here, and then maybe at the end we can tie it into other things we have going on. Just to like this, because this I think this is something I actually want to look back at very much, like 6 months, a year from now, and having these things might be pertinent. Which is, yes, they're all in Notion, but for the time being and ease of access, I'll put them here and then I'll link them in Notion if need be. So don't worry about Notion stuff. Okay. I guess we'll continue now. So somewhere around here, I'm trying to adjust this to be a little use of this. And I'm gonna return this back. Okay, I think that's doable. So, I don't know if we finished this part yet. Was this still like the nerve cell? Yeah, we went deeply into the nerve part, but then a little bit of like, I think I highlighted this, only conduct itself can be considered as a functional unit of the nervous system. Okay. And so into architecture, it gets into more, a majority of neurons nerves can be assigned to well-defined morphological cases. These are characterized by given pattern distribution. The following implications are significant for the understanding of the nervous system. There's necessary genetic variability in the shape of the nerve cells. The functional organization of the nervous system must be such as to tolerate this double variability. Due to genetic and systematic variability, no two nervous systems of animals of the same species are identical, and they resemble each other only to the extent they're organized according to the same general pattern. It's the organization defining the class and not any particular connectivity which determine the modes of functioning given any given nervous system. I think that's actually a nice point, and one I may reference later for my sort of crusade for nuance. This would be a Trumpy way to call it. It's nice to see that kind of put in that language here, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay. We talked about the shape of nerve cells.
I thought 3 was interesting because it sounded so Levin-y. And also, I guess this is this Levin's work that I'm thinking of is stuff on cancer. So cancer would be an example of when part of the organism becomes, like in Maturana's terms, is no longer operating in service of the maintenance of the organism and is therefore kind of like no longer a part of it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
The organism ends at the boundary that a self-referring organization defines in the maintenance of its identity. Let's talk about identity. Action always leads to a change in the state of active server services, which is, he really hammers that home in the next sections.
I also like that bit. Sorry, the way I prepared for this was I just highlighted sections that were thought-provoking, but I didn't necessarily write down all the particular thoughts. But I do remember that this one, the end of 3, I thought that was a nice version of what some people mean when they say that perception is like for action. That's like a genre of E is like the perception action connection. And so I thought that was a nice example of it.
Yeah. And talks about the subordination truism. The nervous system cannot give rise to a conduct that implies the concomitance of states of activity for which there's no anatomical basis. As a result of its architectural organization, every point in the central nervous system constitutes an anatomical localization with respect to the possibility of establishing certain functional concomitances. From this, it follows that any localized lesion of the nervous system must necessarily interfere in a localized manner with the possibility of synthesizing some specific conduct or state of neural activity.
Okay.
When he says truism, like,
it's self-evident. Obviously.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this is interesting because he's saying that although cognition isn't like part and parcel of the meat, you have to have some meat there to have cognition. So it's like it's necessary but not sufficient. So you have this, yeah. So you can do this with lesion studies. You can lesion a part of the brain and you can disrupt the behavior. And if you get deeply into the lesion studies, you find that not every lesion is equivalent. In other words, if you lesion certain parts of a structure, it results in less of a deficit or more of a deficit. And it's just depending on how that works. So he doesn't talk about a network, which actually might be crucial here. But the idea that there's the anatomy needs to be there, but doesn't necessarily give rise to the cognitive state. I think that's a kind of an interesting thing in light of kind of how we think about function. Although I think this was before really people started thinking in terms of networks as a actual thing that you can parcel out from data. That people would talk about like nervous system networks or whatever. It goes back to Ramoni Cahal, but understanding the functional aspects of those networks. That's something that it's maybe more recent. We really appreciated that.
Yeah. Let's keep going. So on to more function talk. The way the nerve system is functioning is bound to its anatomical organization. There's two aspects. One refers to the domain of interactions defined by the nervous system, other which refers to which part of the domain used by a given species. Different species interact with different sets of relations of different nations. The nervous system only interacts with relations, almost as if the brain was a relational organ. However, since the functioning of the nervous system is anatomy bound, these interactions necessarily mediate by physical interactions. Excuse me. It's actually an interesting analogy. I think it's the eye. It's not by the quantity of light absorbed by the eye, but by the receptors and the states of activity within the retina. Yeah. And then again, if anybody will jump in, I'm gonna try to keep pushing for. I'm gonna try to keep pushing forward until it's something that obviously distracts me. But then please jump in or go back if you want to talk about anything that we don't.
Yeah, I'm okay kind of moving to where we just jumping from our comments, like you could see to where you have highlights, and I can do the same.
Yeah, I would love to have a way where we can like easily highlight together and do that, because that'd be ideal, and I still would find the best tool for that. So it could potentially be this, but it might not be yet. Anyway, so on to function 3, I kind of want to experiment writing this way, because it's like just big paragraphs, but like, here's my topic, and I'm going to say it in this topic and in the line. So do the property of neurons, etc. Yeah. Under no circumstances is it possible to associate the activity of any particular cell with any particular interaction of a living system. It talks about operational localizations. It talks about the anatomical and functional organization of the nervous system secures the synthesis of behavior, not a representation of the world. Maybe not a world model. Hence, it's only with a synthesis of behavior that one can interfere. I forget why this was highlighted, but yeah. Surfaces of the nervous system is localized in terms of the organism's surface of interactions, but not in terms of representations of the interactions it can generate. Surfaces of interaction, meaning boundaries, and he talks more, I think, ahead about the proprioception and sort of that what's around me, and sort of, again, it's sort of this. I might just ask, see if I can find out, like, when did affordance come into play? Well, when did that word? Because it's kind of like talking around that a little bit.
Oh yeah, I wonder what like the original affordance paper was.
Was that Gibson related or not?
It may go back to Gibson.
What?
I was totally thinking Gibson. Yeah.
According to ChatGPT, it was Gibson.
No, I that's right. I knew that.
Can we ask Wikipedia instead?
Yeah.
But I think ChatGPT is just cribbing off of Wikipedia. But
Wikipedia, yeah. I just want to make sure it's not adding something.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, interesting. Like, I wonder. I would be cool to just like summon Gibson and be like, "Hey, like, did you read this paper and realize there was a word he was trying to get at here and trying to make it a thing?" But it's really actually it's quite fun. I know we kind of talked about this before, but like, I think one of the biggest takeaways from this paper for me will be a lot of what we talked about here, what Amanda said here, in that, because I know for me, like, it gives a very particular historical grounding backwards. So yeah. Anyway, the fundamental anatomical organization of your system is basically uniform. The same functional operations are performed in various parts, although in different contexts and integrated different manners. It goes into details about some of that.
Something I thought that was odd there was this basic uniformity of organization can be expressed by saying all that is accessible to the nervous system at any point are states of blah, 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 blah. And that struck me as odd because Fuchs argued, and I was compelled by this argument, that like it doesn't make sense to say like, oh, for the brain, you have to say for the subject, for the person that is conscious and aware. And so this for the nervous system, accessible to the nervous system, kind of threw me off. So I feel like I didn't understand exactly that like reformulation of this uniformity of organization. Maybe it's just like something like it's emergent. I don't know.
Here we go. This is what you were talking about right here. Yeah.
Like, what does it mean for something to be accessible to the nervous system? Is it like global workspace kind of thought, where it's like what activity can be picked up by a different part of the brain? I don't know how much that matters, but I thought that was funny. Fuchs was was popping into my head there.
So I was thinking of that the Brett paper,
Oh yeah.
and at least the all that is accessible are states of relative activity between nerve cells. Like not necessarily in that mechanistic description, but just in the sense that there's this one woman at the meeting today said the same thing about quantum sensors. She said, but she used the brain as the analogy. She said, in the brain there's no strict dividing line between the sensors and the information processing.
Mm.
I mean, would you say that was somewhat of a Brett point?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which one was that again?
The coding.
Oh man.
Being not, what was it like?
Yeah.
Is coding a relevant metaphor? Yeah.
Something like.
Yeah,
thank
one.
you. Yeah.
Oh,
that's a response.
Yeah, this is a response.
Oh yeah, it was like a. Was it PBR paper or something?
There's a Brain Inspired episode about that paper. That's cool. That'd be fun to listen to.
Okay.
Is there 079? Okay. Really.
There's a bunch of apparently some critiques for it, but here's.
Oh yeah, I remember the PDF. It had like,
oh look, there's Safron. Oh, sorry, that's not Safron. I thought that was a pic of Safron.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that particular sentence just made me think of that Brett paper.
Right. Where were we here? And then he concludes his fiction by saying, "This has a fundamental consequence of unless they imply their origin through concomitant events, location, consequences, and interaction, there is no possible distinction between internal and externally generated states of nervous activity." And this leads to him talking a lot about this sort of inherent circularity, maybe a precursor to vertical or horizontal. But yeah, okay. 2, relations with the nervous system are given by the physical interaction of the organism, hence depend on the anatomical organization. These relations are not those that the observer can describe as holding between component properties of the entity in its cognitive domain. They are relations generated in the interaction itself and depend on both the structural organization of the organism and the properties of the universe that match the domain of interactions that the organization defines. The sensory surface. Yeah. Okay. I think it's a really interesting thing, and if I was to do a major personal review note of this paper, some of it would be like the way, I really like to clarify Maturana's take on domains. Like he says cognitive domain. He says this is where this domain ends and this doesn't end. Like the way he's using these things and sort of what he means by the jurisdiction of them is interesting to me. And I feel like it's going to take me a lot more to grasp some of what he's getting at. But I appreciate that he's venturing on that. Cells. If an internal interaction takes place, the state of activity of the nervous system is modified by the change in relative activity of neurons. Okay. Oops.
Another interesting thing about this too is that, like I said, this is pre network theory, so the domains that Maturana is describing are likely not going to be mutually exclusive, and maybe he doesn't think of them that way. But it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see what that would translate into, what his definition of domain is, if it's largely like a mathematical mapping, or if it's like a mapping of the actual network, and then what are the consequences of using network theory? Does it really hold? Do a lot of those assumptions hold? Because in network theory, we have overlapping, networks, and we have interactions that, it's not like you can. I mean, you can find you can't really find modules. That's kind of been talked about a lot, and talked about and failed in cognitive science. But you get these, cliques that overlap, and you can discover them, but they're not they don't have absolute boundaries around them. It's just based on what we're discovering with tools that we have. So it'd be very interesting. That would be another interesting paper, is apply network neuroscience to some of these ideas.
Yeah, I think that is. Network neuro nowadays. That's a fun one. We're getting close to here. I think the 4 comments are interesting, because then he gets into. I'm gonna have to move this, but he ggets into EGRT stuff heavily again there.
Just to that, before we get that far, I really liked toward the top of the second column talking about how the organism always behaves in the present. He outlines the sense in which the organism is determined by its past, whether developmental or evolutionary, but then it explains how that's the product of observation.
Yes.
I just thought that was cool.
Yeah, in terms of the language, and that's the thing that goes kind of back to the scoping stuff, because for me, there's something here that has to do with is because of the level of both language development, but also just the scope that he's at, that he can, is it easier because he's maybe higher and less granular? Is it easier to just have more able to incorporate the dimension of, I don't really want to say time or development here outright, but something along those lines. I think from the complete philosophy of, I guess, science, or philosophy of domain development, which I don't know what to call really. That's a very interesting concept to me, and one I want to work around it. I guess I'll just go here. There's no difference in the nature of the embodied relationships generated through either external or internal interactions. In a nervous system capable of interacting with some of its own internal states, if they were independent entities, there are 2 consequences. And I think this is an interesting section ahead for me, this whole chunk. The distinction between external and internal can only arise through concomitant events, etc. A nervous system that is capable of treating its internally generated states of activity different from its externally generated states, that is, of distinguishing their origin, is capable of abstract thinking. And I wonder, is that very obvious truism category, or nowadays is that controversial statement in the present sense in some capacity? Is that a super obsolete way of talking about it? And recursive is. He gets onto these 4 comments, and then he goes, bear with me as I move this. The first one is basically, it gets into nervous system embodiments and the correspondence between observers. Let me go all the way over here. Different states of activity in the nervous system, and as such, line in its cognitive domain. Again, that cognitive domain. They describe functional organization of the nervous system in the cognitive domain of the observer and point to the ability of the nervous system to create some of its own states of independent entities in which it can interact, but they do not characterize the nature of the functional subordination of the nervous system of its own states. They're drawing a pretty clear line and saying this subordination is that of a functionally closed, state-determined, ultra-stable system, modulated by interactions. And he cites Ashby. The closed nature of this functional organization nervous system is a consequence of the self-referring domain interactions. He talks about is change mirroring. Close this section by saying the evolutionary subordination of the architecture of the central nervous system to the topology of the sensory and effector services appears to be an obvious necessity.
So the self-reference is kind of what people say when they, or what they maybe mean when they say theory of mind. You know, having this idea of being able to think about what another person is thinking, but also using your own mind to think that, and like having those kind of, like you have external states, internal states, and you're kind of able to regulate those. I mean, people say theory of mind, but sometimes they mean very different things when they talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's a cool term, I guess. But what does that mean in terms of like something rigorous? Like, well, like this, you know? How do we treat those relations? And what do they look like?
I think it is interesting. I like this. Like this sense of being able to designate origins, and because a lot of I think what Maturana's his way of getting around that is, well, not getting around it, but like making sense of it is. I'm trying to get a good quote for it. Maybe it's just on the other sort of the other page or not. I can't really find a quote that I'm looking for, but the way I'll just put this here. Yeah. Interaction with his own internal states. Yes. This seems to have acquired autonomous evolutionary course with the development of the neocortex in mammals, which arises at the center of anatomical projection, whose evolution line would be accompanied by increased dependency on the organism on its own internal states of nervous activity.
The experiments mentioned a little bit further down in D. I forget the details, but they're really interesting. Basically, they showed that there's like 2 cats and one has a normal interaction with this environment. It's free. The other, I think, sees all of the environment, but it's like riding around on a little thing. It's being taken around its environment, so it doesn't have this feedback. And its eyes, its like vision doesn't develop, because even though it saw that it had the same, I guess for Maturana, it like didn't technically have the same input, even if it's like the same images hitting the eyeballs, because it didn't have the same feedback based off of its own bodily location and based off of its own, like, you know, endogenous movement through the environment.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting sort of developmental lens to this, and sort of the access to feedback, the access to the alternatives developmentally. And there's an interesting flight analogy too. I think I could do wacky, fuzzy, arbitrary math and think about behavior in a similar state to like speed, like behavior is this level, and then you have these sort of the effectors are trying to maintain this behavior, this sort of allostatic position, this state, and then it changes it accordingly. Gibson, I wonder which Gibson that is. The same is apparent for the experiments with depth. Okay, depth. I think this is a different Gibson, but let's.
No, I think it's J.J. Gibson, although his wife did a lot of work on development as well. They worked together, but I think it's probably J.J.
That's interesting. This particular document, I don't think has the citations at the end, or at least the ones. Oh, maybe maybe it's just me. No, the one doesn't. Anyway, so yeah, I guess we'll be on the description. We have some time left, right? Maybe we've got 20 minutes or so left. So we get to the description section, which is over here. A living system, due to its circular organization, is an inductive system and functions always in a predictive manner. What happened once will occur again. Its organization, genetic and otherwise, is conservative and repeats only that which works. For the same reason, living systems are historical systems. This relevance of a given conduct or mode of behavior is always determined in the past. The goal state, in the language of the observer, that controls the development of an organism is, except for mutations, determined by the genome of the parent organism. The same is true for behavior in general. The present state is always specified from the previous state that restricts the fields of possible modulations by independent co-committances. Same state behavior.
I have a little bit of an issue with the last highlighted section, or maybe a question, I don't know.
Here?
So down there. So a living system, due to its circular organization, is inductive and functions always in a predictive manner. So he's suggesting that the organization is influenced by sort of the innateness, and that the world is going, that you can always know what's going on in the world, like the patterns are very clear, and that what will happen once will happen again, but generally speaking, you're going to encounter similar things. But what if you lived in a world where that wasn't true? Or what if you lived in a world where your environment changed drastically, or things weren't in that predictive, things weren't as predictive as, say, like if I put you in an environment where there was high degrees of structure. And the reason I'm asking this is because I was thinking about this with the good regulator, and that the ever good regulator theorem doesn't really assume any kind of form of the input data. It just kind of assumes that, well, this kind of system structure, it will self-regulate, and, we can maybe, use some analogies from codomains of the system and the controller, and all the system needs to do is learn, or the controller needs to do is learn the structure of the system. But what if the structure of the system isn't easy to learn? And what if the structure of the data, say, is very non-normal, then maybe it's not as predictive. And that's something, I don't know. I don't think they were thinking about that, but I certainly am. And that's something that's a little puzzling to me, because when you get at good regulation, you can just say it's good, and you can just say, well, it's good because I say so. But how do we really know it is? Because I certainly don't think that, I think the struggles we've had with, we've had a lot of there's this uncanniness of prediction of some things by AI systems, but some things it's not very good at all, and it doesn't seem to get very much better with advances in different methods. So, what is it about the data that's, where is it resistant to the sort of prediction, and where does it really excel at this sort of prediction?
Yeah, I wonder how, like, I think that's a very fair point because I piloted the predictive thing and like always in a predictive manner because like unless you want to maybe make something like here is the state of like unknown, I'm in the unknown state, I'm in the state of things aren't normal and that's a state to like kind of a prediction of okay, but I mean I mean I think an interesting, I don't know what to qualify it as, point is sort of like the biological even it's not really a commentary on artificial versus biological intelligence or neural networks or anything, but like the biological having to sort out, having to maintain. And I think that's an interesting potential difference or potential factor in prediction, like maintaining the past and being historically influenced versus predicting the future or versus whatever. And there's a lot of, I mean, you could get into here obviously like minimizing surprise and a lot of more contemporary theories about what that might be. And again, it'd be really interesting to see draw those lines out a bit more.
Yeah.
Um,
Minimizing surprise is the point here because that's the thing. The surprise is the thing that's the problem here. And that's not imbued in the structure of the regulatory system.
Yeah. And I feel like, I think there's sort of, it reminds me honestly a bit of like the metabrain stuff. And so like you have a base functioning of things to operate, or even you have this regulatory thing, like not just a body for movement, but like a body that's like, okay, this part has to be operate in a specific set of states, and then maybe even a finite set of states. But there's other things that maybe are engaging much more so in the surprise or the unknown or the abstract, like that kind of more structure. I don't like. I'm not going to go systems one, systems two, Kahneman stuff. But sort of, I like more of the sort of metabrains, past metabrains discussions about that. Yeah. I don't know if we can incorporate any of that, or that's maybe where we want to go with some of the world modeling paper. But let's see. So finishing stuff, description, goal state and language of the observer controls the development organism except mutations. Yeah, okay. There. Recurrence to the same state of relativity should give rise to the same behavior no matter how the recurrence originates. With the expansion of the cognitive domain, during evolution, the types of behavior have changed as well as how their relevance implemented. Different kinds of behavior are relevant to the maintenance of the basic circularity of the living organism. Since the niche of an organism is the set of all classes of interaction which it can enter, interesting, and the observer beholds the organism in an environment that he defines, for him, any one of the organism's behavior appears as actualization of this niche, that is, first order description of the environment. This description, which I guess is what this actually means, however, is description refers to behavior interactions of the observed organism, not of the representation of the environmental states. And the relationship between the behavior and niche lies exclusively in the cognitive domain of the observer. I think that's something that I don't really know. Like I think a great question is, and maybe it's a simple one, it's much simpler than there's an obvious answer to, and I don't know it because I'm not with it for it. But if you look at cognitive science right now, like, or psychology or whatever. Like, what is this? Is this basically saying, like, I don't know, like when I think of the Fouriers, I don't, at least in my, I don't know, poorly educated version of myself, when I hear Fouriers, I don't think in terms of this direct commentary on observer. Maybe that's a core of like what situatedness is supposed to be, or something else. But it's not like how does this is like direct commentary on where the observer is in this picture, and very sort of, you know, cybernetically, I don't know, second or third wave of trying to talk about that perhaps. But I think it's an important point. I just wonder if that kind of talking about it is tenable or out of vogue, or just because not the way it evolved. I don't know. I want to put that here actually.
What was his background again?
Maturana?
Yeah,
I think he was just a big biology guy.
a biologist
Yeah,
would be the. Yeah. I mean,
originally, I suppose.
so I mean, it just seems like he's using it in the sense of evolutionary biology / ecology.
Yeah.
Which is, well, so then what?
He was trained in biology at Harvard.
Got it. So,
and he studied under the guidance of John Zachary Young, a renowned neuroscientist and comparative anatomist. And early research on neurobiology and neurophysiology of vision. Yeah. Anyway, that's Jesse's question. Still time. I keep thinking we're out of time, but we're not. We still have a little bit more we can do. An organism can modify its behavior. Can modify the behavior of another organism in two basic ways. Interaction with it in a manner that directs both organisms towards e.g. courtship and fight, by orienting the behavior of the other organism to some part of its domain of interactions different from the present interactions, but comparable in the orientation of the other one. In the first case, it said the two organisms interact. In the second case, they communicate. That's maybe an important difference. The second case is the basic linguistic behavior. I think he gets to Chomsky. He mentions Chomsky like a little bit later in the language section.
Oh, does he mention Chomsky? I don't know if I caught that.
He cites them, at least. I don't know if he mentions them specifically, like in the grammar. He mentions them somewhere around here. But yeah.
A brief comment. I liked the word choice of orientation. Pavlov, I think Pavlov wrote about the orienting reflex as like a very fundamental operation of the organism. And that's a concept I've been wanting to explore more. Because I think they're talking about the same thing. It's like directing attention to, but it's a much like richer concept, I think.
Yeah, and that might be interesting to look into. But go ahead.
Well, and I've gone back and I no longer think I know what he means by niche.
By niche, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. it's different. This
But why?
it's
Why
very
redefine words that have, even in 1970, had a pretty.
You'll see the definition once we finish the whole paper. and
That's
it'll
right.
all
That's
kind of-
right. The
everything
definitions
will
will
become
become clear
self-clear.
as we progress.
that's kind of why I mentioned the intelligence paper that we talked about Saturday too, because I feel like I like what he's doing with the language, but it's also like I'm kind of like I'm in a place where I feel I don't know. I have some language beef. I guess I'll just leave it at that. I have something I need to sort out or just like put together my thoughts about the language stuff and just have to just do it. So we're talking about orienting. Communicative description. So he links to kind of step back for a second. He's linking description to observe the role of the observer. He's linking the cognitive domain and the role of the observer and and description. He capital D description.
But see, then he goes and says something that seems like a clear description of niche that I can understand.
That means description or niche.
Well, that you know, an actualization of the niche as a first order description of the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry.
No,
it's just bang on that. It's not becoming clear as we progress.
In an orienting interaction, the behavior of the first organism as a communicative description causes the nervous system of the second one. The second one is specific to activity. Okay, descriptions of its niche. Connoted.
I gotta say, I kind of want to try and come up with a translation of these definitions into reinforcement learning definitions. I mean, I do almost feel like they're appropriate.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, anyway, sorry.
Even the next, we could maybe pick up here next time because we're kind of flailing in this part. But like I think the end of this section on description, I think linking description, thinking, and natural language will be interesting because thinking is doesn't mean is a very specific a meaning to Maturana here. Thinking is a mode of operation of the nervous system that reflects functionally its internal emitonical projection, possibly multiply onto itself. And so that's the concluding thing, and he gets quite in depth with it here. And then he talks about the process above is independent of language, and then goes on about abstract thinking and all this other stuff. And it's like, it would be good of me to really have some clear statements about, so what is he saying from what's description, what's thinking, what's natural language, head for next time. I don't know if I'll do it, but that's a worthy challenge that I might aspire to commenting on. Any concluding thoughts as we come to the top of the hour for all this stuff? Yeah, we're pretty much cresting at the halfway point. There's the Chomsky reference on page 15.
Oh yes.
Well, citation prose. 15. Yeah. Okay, I mean, we didn't really even get to the representation part yet. I don't think. There, he talks about the observer again. Representation's going to be around here. Right?
That was way back, yeah.
Okay, we talked about that already. Okay, good.
Some relation, what a relation is still isn't totally clear to me. But again, maybe it'll just be
Right.
self-evident.
No, you know, and again, maybe it's just because I'm coming from looking over these world model dream papers, but it's just like, yeah, when he's describing the niche as the set of all, what was it again? The set of all relations. No, the set of interactions. Interactions.
There's he talks about pure relations in the start of cognitive processes.
Right.
Right.
So
Right.
to be charitable, which we don't have to be, but to put on the charitable hat, the charitable giving hat that you put money in. I could see Maturana basically trying to say, I know that these fields aren't developed right now, and the language I'm using isn't really going to make sense until you kind of go back and look at what I mean by relations and thinking and domain and description, because they don't exist. And it's got to be like, I have a particular, I guess, sympathy for that. But it doesn't, it's hard. It isn't, I think this is something that could be read front to back a couple times, and then you actually get a place to really connect the dots more. But I don't think we're going to do that necessarily. But I'm glad to be looking at it with everybody here. So that's the top of the hour. I will say I'll try to continue to pick out things and move forward, because I think once we get to a certain point, like is this conclusions? Yeah, we're almost at the end of like his stuff, and then we can pick out some things from the conclusion and go from there. But yeah, I'm okay with doing that next time if everyone else is, and then we can pick on some other you can pick on somebody else. Let's pick some other papers too. But that's what I see ahead. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
And no cybernetics group tomorrow.
No.
And I don't think I have a need to meet on Friday, but I might try to pester some people with my ideas about stuff by Friday or Saturday. So yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody for tonight, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah, see you later.
Take care.